Well, as we were standing here filming, Darren and I just got buzzed by an airplane.
This is getting to be a recurring theme now. It wasn't as bad as when we were in Lubbock, Texas, and we had a plane actually sneak up behind us and buzz us. That was a little scary. This one we actually saw coming, so it wasn't so bad. But you know, there are a lot of aerial applicators out there doing a variety of tasks, both in row crop farming and also when we get into pastures and rangeland management. We thought we'd talk about aerial application a little bit today.
Well, one of the biggest challenges that aerial applicators have is making sure that the product ends up on target. And it's an issue with any sprayer anywhere. With ground rigs though, in other words the sprayers that farmers will pull behind a tractor, it's a little bit easier just because you're sitting on the ground and you can control everything and you can stop at a moment's notice or anything like that. Well, with a pilot, what they have to do is they'll drop down right above the crop. It's challenging. I mean, you've got to have a good pilot who knows what he's doing, who's going to do this safely, and is going to drop down right above that crop. And the weather has to be just right. The wind has to be blowing out of the right direction and stuff. And we've got to make sure that these things end up on the crop that they are intended to go on. And so that's probably the number one concern of every pilot out there, is making sure it ends up on target. And for the most part, the guys do a pretty good job, but it's hard to find the right days to spray. We live in one of the windiest states in the country, South Dakota.
Oh, so we're blessed with potential for wind energy, Brian. You have to look at it from the positive side of things.
Yeah, but when you're trying to get spraying done, it's difficult to keep that product on target.
Well, with aerial application, you've got all those things to worry about with the field, and then they have to worry about themselves. They've got to watch out for trees and power lines and all these things, and they've got to find just the right time of day to get things done without all the off-target issues. So when it comes to aerial application, we have to try and help these guys out a little bit too. Let's talk about pasture and range management right now. When we're out there going after weeds like Canada thistle or leafy spurge, some of the areas that we're trying to kill these weeds in, the terrain is so rough, it's really about impossible to do with a ground rig. So aerial application is our best and sometimes only option. Now, when we're going to do this, we've got to do it at the right time of year. Early spring is a great time to do things. There's not a lot of crop up. It's a little easier to get in there. The weeds are at the right stage. They haven't started putting on seed heads yet or anything like that. The other time to do it is in the later fall. Now, we're still in August. It's still a little bit early, but it's important to think about this because we're getting a lot of questions where guys do have a little bit of time now. They're starting to think about some of these things that, you know, man, maybe I should get this done before harvest. And really the right answer in most cases is to wait till just before the first hard killing frost.
Yeah, so most aerial applicators, they won't even spray pastures in the middle of the summer if there are soybeans or any crop that could potentially get hurt in that area. And I guess what we're talking about is mainly when you start getting into pastures, you get into some of these products that drift quite a bit more, like let's say 2,4-D or Banvel. And because they have the tendency to drift or even volatilize and pick up and move off that field, we just try to avoid those things, and most of the pilots try to avoid those applications while there are broadleaf crops in the area. So things like soybeans, sugar beets, sunflowers, any broadleaf crop, 2,4-D and Banvel are so tough on those crops. So again, like what Darren said, what you want to do is talk to your aerial applicator in your area about spraying your pastures in the early spring, or especially a lot of times in the fall is a really good time to do it. You can get a good kill. It's just, if possible, you'd like to get it done prior to the first hard killing frost. When you start getting late into the fall and it's after your hard killing frost, you don't do as good a job on the weeds. So we'd like to do it probably in September is a really good time in our part of the country, and you just have to look at it and work with your pilot in your area, try to pick the right weather, and then again, pick the right time of the year.
Now, one more question that we really haven't answered is how effective is aerial application versus ground application? Because when you think about it, if you're spraying with 10 to 20 gallons of water with a ground rig, the aerial guys are doing things a little different. They've got more pressure to work with. They can really push the product down into the crop. And in most cases, they're working with a gallon of water, maybe 2 or 3 gallons of water on the high side. And you think, wow, this is a totally different deal. Really, there are some differences, but for the most part, aerial application works fairly well, just like ground application does. There's going to be a failure here or there, but 9 times out of 10, things are going to work out just fine.
Yeah, I guess I prefer the ground application. I think we do a slightly better job with ground application.
Well, it's easier to back into the corner of the field with the ground
right.
rig than it is with aerial application.
Yep.
They're coming in at, you know, who knows what speed. trying to get everything done, where you can stop with a ground rig and sit there for a second, or adjust it just slightly to get an uneven fence line or something like that.
Well, talking about that though, you know, a lot of people used to say, well, aerial application is not that exact and they don't hit the rows just right or anything. Now that they have GPS, they may do a better job than you with your ground rig in terms of being right in line and making an accurate pass every time through the field. So a lot of the problems they used to have are now corrected with GPS, better planes, better technology, and then the more we know about herbicides and insecticides and things like that in terms of drift and in terms of the time of the year to spray, it seems like aerial application is a very good option, especially compared to 10 or 20 years ago. The guys are doing a really good job.
Well, aerial application is great, but can it control this tough weed of the week? Can you identify this week's weed?